Olá, centelhas, tudo bem? Olha, eu aqui com a minha centelha para falar com a sua e nós estamos aqui com um convidado muito especial. Estou muito feliz dessa conexão das nossas centelhas. Eu já falei dele aqui para vocês, é o Aaron Abke. E agora a gente vai conversar com ele, ele vai se apresentar e compartilhar um pouco com vocês da história dele, tá bom? Então é isso. Aaron, é com você.
Hola. Hola. Thanks for having me, May. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, great. So, Aaron, you started on YouTube sharing your experience with enlightenment and your background as a Christian and expanding your consciousness. I already talked with my subscribers here about your story. Actually, I told them about your enlightenment story. So I would like you to start from the beginning. It's going to be really awesome.
Sure thing, yeah. We were just talking before the show started that we both grew up Christian in the church.
Yes.
And I was actually a pastor's son. And I had great, amazing parents, a great church that really always emphasized the right things about the love of God, the goodness of God, the forgiveness of God. So I didn't grow up around a whole lot of dogma or religious fundamentalism. But when I went to college, I wanted to be a pastor just like my dad and go the church route and all that. And I went to college, got a degree, a bachelor's in music and theology. And then I took my first church job, full-time church job as a worship pastor playing music. And it was a very, very religious kind of fundamentalist church that was just, I was constantly confronted with all of the theologies that I just kind of had avoided my whole life, like God sending people to hell if you're not a Christian, women are inferior to men, the rapture is coming, the end times are near, all this kind of stuff. And it just really quickly made a sick feeling in my stomach of like, I can't believe in this kind of God. So life put me in a position where I had to make a decision of like, hey, do you believe in this God or not? And I got so burnt out working at that church so quickly that it was like as if I knew one thing in the universe, I knew that God didn't exist, that religious God. I knew it wasn't real. So I quit my church job and I moved back to Oklahoma where I had gone to college and just kind of started this whole seeking journey. And I got into Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts, kind of the gateway teachers into enlightenment. And I spent 4 or 5 years really seeking answers to all those questions that Christianity had left me with, like if there is a God, if there is justice in the universe. I know it doesn't look like this heaven-hell model. What does it look like? What is God like? And really just re-imaging who God is in my mind. And then when I was about 27 is when I had my sort of awakening experience happen.
Wow, great. Yeah, I was talking with my subscribers here, which I call centelhas, the divine
Centelhas.
spark. Yes, it's a Portuguese term for higher self. And we were talking about enlightenment because I had a short enlightenment experience after I delivered my second baby. Actually, that baby that I showed you in the beginning.
Alex.
Alex, yes, he's 8 months now. And I was
so it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, no, because right now I'm more into studying enlightenment and so I was like, I looked at the sky and I saw a bird flying, small, big bird flying. And I said, oh, look at that bird. That's God flying there. And I looked at a tree and I said, God is the tree. And then I had this enlightenment experience and I started to cry. And I saw people on the street and I was in love with everyone and everything. And I wanted to hug everyone. And I was like, what's happening to me? But it was really, really short. Only a few hours, like a couple hours. And ego was back again.
Knocking on the door.
On the door, the mind, and I'm always trying to get back there. And so I would like to share your enlightenment story because they heard from me, but it's going to be an honor to hear from you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think back to it very often, and the paradox that you just pointed out is really what I've spent the most time thinking about and working out, because when we have those oneness experiences and then the ego comes back online, there's a feeling of, I lost it, now I have to go get it back. And of course, we know conceptually from these teachings we read and listen to that it's not true, that enlightenment doesn't go anywhere. It never leaves us. So then why don't I experience it, right?
Yes.
And that was what sort of happened to me when I was 27. I was working at Google at the time in Mountain View, Google headquarters, as a personal trainer. And so I was very depressed at the time. I was really going through my dark night of the soul. Leaving my religion had a lot to do with that. There was a lot of identity crisis that came into that. But basically, I was going up to this balcony above my gym on my lunch break every day and listening to Eckhart Tolle for about an hour while I ate my lunch and just kind of stared at the clouds. And it was the only time of my day that I didn't feel depressed and could have some peace of mind, some relief from my mind. And so I'd probably done that for maybe 2 to 3 months. And there was one particular day, just like any other day, where I was listening to a lecture where Eckhart was sort of mocking things that the ego says to us and making light of them. And then he would laugh, the audience would laugh, and I would laugh. And so he said like 4 or 5 statements, and I started to recognize the familiarity of what he was saying in my own mind. I was like, yeah, that's basically exactly what my mind says to me all day long. Like things like, if only everything would go better for me, then I could truly be happy. He does his laugh. And then you hear the audience laugh, and I would laugh. And then, like the 4th or 5th time, I kind of laughed myself into some kind of samadhi state. Laughing can be a very powerful way of realizing a truth, I think. If you can laugh at something, like something in you gets the truth of that joke. And it was like the joke was on me, I guess. I saw that all of the dysfunction and the suffering and the depression was just a little, almost like a tape recorder in my mind that was just repeating the same crap over and over. And I was just believing it and listening to it. And it was just a story that wasn't true, but I was just giving it so much belief. Wow. And something about that insight just really blew the doors off of my egoic sense of self. And I experienced exactly what you described, just a very much a oneness experience with everything. And the way I like to describe it is sort of like, it was as if you could give somebody like a tour of your mind, and you're opening different doors, and you're like, here's my personality, say hi to my personality, it's in that door, great. Next door, here's my desires, say hi to my desires. And I was opening all these doors to show where I was, and there was nobody behind the doors except for just machinery, like mechanical machines running automatically and like steam coming out. And I'm like, wait, there's no person in here. There's just a bunch of machines. I'm a little confused. I thought this was where I was. It was kind of like that. And then I just couldn't think, couldn't speak, didn't want to think, didn't need to think. Everything was perfect.
Wow. Wow.
So I just had so much joy at the perfection of creation, just seeing it everywhere. Like, wow, look at this marvelous universe that God has made. And I've been overlooking it for problems that didn't exist. Like, wow, what a travesty that I've been missing this. So I kind of like just floated down to my next personal training appointment on this, having this samadhi enlightenment experience. And I walk into the gym like glowing, and I'm all happy. And my client immediately recognized this big change in my countenance. I was like, wow, Aaron, you look very happy today. It's great to see you in such a good mood. And I was like, yeah, I am really happy today. And so I spent 2 weeks like that, in that state where I couldn't even remember how to suffer. Sometimes I would try to think about why I was suffering before, and I couldn't quite get it. I was like, I was depressed about something. It doesn't make any sense. I couldn't remember how to suffer. I was just so happy and so free. And then what happened was 2 weeks like that went by. And I mean, I was in a very dysfunctional relationship at the time with a girl who had borderline personality disorder. And we were really fighting to work on a relationship. And I was very, in my depressed state, I was very disempowered. She had a lot of anger and rage from her own past and issues. And she was always offloading it onto me and screaming at me and accusing me of stuff. And I would just sort of sit on the couch and take it, because I just, we can make this work. I'll suffer and I'll take the blows if we can work this out. And all of a sudden in that new state, I realized how incredibly selfish it was for me to do that for myself and for her. And so I realized the best thing I can do is let life lead her on her next journey and let life take her. Because clearly me and her weren't working out. It just wasn't a match. So I had this very loving breakup conversation with her. I'm like, look, it's going to be great. You're going to go your way. I'm going to go mine. And God loves us both. We're going to be fine. You know. And she's, no, don't leave me. She's crying and begging me to stay. And seeing her suffer made some of my ego come back a little bit. I'm like, oh, look what you're doing, you jerk. You're making her cry. Like, come on, stay with her. Give her another chance yet again. But I knew better. So we went our separate ways. Maybe a day or two went by later. And then I woke up on the 2-week mark exactly from the day it happened. And I looked at the calendar and went, wow, it's been 2 weeks since that experience. And then the first real egoic thought came back to my mind, which was, I wonder if this will be my permanent state forever. Can you see that? I wonder if this will be my state. Whose state?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. The I came back.
Yeah, the I thought.
The I thought, yeah. I've been reading Nisargadatta Maharashi.
Yeah.
And also Ramana Maharashi. And
my two favorites.
And yeah, actually I saw on your Instagram, I Am That, the book. And I was like, I need to read that.
Oh, that book, man.
Amazing.
Changed my life.
Yeah. It's a life-changing book.
Yeah.
So I have one question about enlightenment. Because you described nothing like maybe most people would think about enlightenment. Because, for example, I have a friend and he thinks that when he becomes enlightened, he's going to see angels or, open his third eye and he's going to see new dimensions and, have superpowers and everything. And for example, so like Eckhart Tolle or Alan Watts, they seem normal people. And what I experienced, I was like a normal person. I still saw the trees and people. I was just in heaven inside of myself. No thoughts, you just are. I didn't see anything different. So would you, because there are many misconceptions about enlightenment, maybe people think you're going to have superpowers. Not that is not possible in a deeper state of...
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. But I think the goal must be not having superpowers, but actually finding heaven inside of yourself.
Yeah. Heaven is inside, isn't it?
Yes.
So the Buddha described enlightenment. His definition was just the end of suffering. Enlightenment is the state of consciousness that is absolutely available for the human, where what we call psychological suffering, which would be one of three emotions of sadness, anger, or fear. Those are the suffering emotions, right? suffering no longer is experienced. It no longer happens for the human. And so then we ask, okay, how do we get to that place of not experiencing suffering? And the answer is that the person has to leave the building, basically. And what we mean when we say the person is really just all the accumulation of my memories from the past and how I define myself. I am this person. I have this job. I've done this thing. I've been traumatized. I've been abused. I've been whatever. And we carry all that past with us into the present moment. And so the mind is going to be always referencing the past to map the past onto the present, to try and understand the present, because the mind can't actually know reality. The mind can only know what you perceive of reality. So all of my past traumas and stories become like defense mechanisms for my mind, that it uses them to understand reality and relate to reality. So in your example, when you saw the bird, when the mind applies a label to something, bird, tree, whatever, if we think that that label is actually what it is, that it actually describes that thing, then it deadens the reality of that thing. Because now the mind only refers to the label and it doesn't actually see the reality of the bird or the tree or the person. So in your experience, when you changed your label of the bird and went, that's not a bird, what my mind thinks of as bird, that's God.
Yes.
It's like a totally new definition. And then you did it to the tree. That's not a tree, that's God. Something about that allowed your mind to get rid of all labels at once. And when all the labels were gone, you experienced the oneness, the unity of everything. So it's really, enlightenment is not a learning, but an unlearning. It's not an achieving, but an erasing, right, of all the past concepts, because enlightenment is already what you are. It's already your nature, right, to be free. You are not a person. You are centellia, right?
Yes.
You are that divine spark. You are that. So to know yourself as that is not to find it or attain it because you're already it, but simply to get rid of all the ideas of what you thought you were. So really that just means we have to question, bring everything to self-inquiry. When we experience suffering, ask the very important question of who is suffering? Who's really suffering right now? When you dig really deep into that question, what you'll discover is it's always a past memory of me that's suffering. Some old story is not being lived up to, or it's not being defended. Some identity I have is being attacked, and that's what's suffering. So really, I can't get rid of the suffering because it's just the effect, right? The cause of suffering is identity. So we remove the identities, and there's nobody to suffer. So the Buddha described that as emptiness, which is this idea of getting rid of everything at all and having that childlike innocence where you look at the world and, yeah, you can still call it a rock, a tree, a bird. You can still use labels, but inwardly, you know that that label's not the reality, and you don't refer to it as that. It's just a useful pointer for conversation, but beyond that, you know that you don't know what anything is. You know that everything's this constant unfolding mystery, this alive mystery of the universe, and you are one of those mysteries. And mystery is where the beauty is, right? Mystery is where we find love and peace and happiness. It's when we think we know that we get into trouble.
Wow, it's really good to listening to you, Aaron. I'm like, I don't want to make questions, just want to listen. You explain so well. Yeah. When you said that enlightenment is not about attaining anything, but to forget everything that you thought you knew. And I think that's the turning point, because, for example, I can give my own example. I was starting to study about that and trying to attain enlightenment or to become enlightened. But actually, the I sense is an illusion. And so you just have to look from outside of the mind. And that's a different turning point, because we are I'm trying to become enlightened. So you think you're going to add more to your ego identity, your character. I always say this is a character, and the body is an avatar or something. But that's just a character. And I really like when you give the example of the character, that you use the Frodo Baggins. The actor thought it was actually the character, but no, I'm not the character. That's the character's problem, not mine. Yeah,
the character's problem.
Yeah, that's awesome, really.
Yeah.
And what advices would you give for people who are trying to not get enlightened, but to
realize that state.
To realize, because you don't become, you just realize it's already there. That's why it's so hard, because it's already there. You already are, but exercise or something in the mind, or I don't know. For example, I read The Love One. Actually, I listened to and your videos of explaining. And one exercise that Ra teaches is to see the creator in everything. And that was the exercise that helped me to have that experience with the bird, with the tree, because it was for so many days, behold the creator, behold the one, behold God. And I was doing that for several days. And I think that helped me somehow.
Big time, for sure. Yeah, it's interesting how it works, right? Because the working mind, the egoic mind that's built on creating labels for everything, it can only understand anything through labels. And that's the beauty of the state of emptiness, is that you don't go around telling reality what it is. Rock, bird, tree, person. I know what this reality is. It's the arrogance of ego. Instead, you let reality tell you what it is. And it whispers what it is to you in the most beautiful, silent ways. Like reality is silent. It doesn't speak a word, but yet it's constantly communicating. It's that paradox. So you really only know reality when you join with reality inwardly by not labeling it. And so it's interesting how we can have these, and many people have these enlightenment experiences that last for a few days or for a while, and then the ego comes back online. And in very, very rare cases, like Eckhart Tolle or Byron Katie, it never comes back online, and they stay that way. But for most of us, it does come back online, because really what's happening is you have introduced such a radically new state of perception to the mind, and it doesn't understand it. And so it retreats for a bit and goes to the back of the room and sort of analyzes to try and understand this new mode of perception. And once it can come up with labels and terms for it, and it feels confident that it's condensed this new way that you're seeing the world, it'll come back and then try to talk to you about it and trick you to come back to the old way of thinking. And it does it in such a crafty way, you hardly even notice that it's doing it. So when I say the person, I like to define it like this. The person that you think you are is actually just a story built upon memories and then moved by desires. So it's like memories and stories, whichever you prefer to call it, and desires are what the person is. So if you get rid of your personal desires, which I would define as anything you believe can fulfill you or enhance you in some way or give you some happiness, that's the person's desires. If you get rid of desire, as Nisargadatta would often say, there's no person left. There's just that experience of emptiness and oneness with the universe. And you find that you are so unbelievably fulfilled inside that you can't possibly conceive of a desire. Like, how could I want anything when the abundance of the universe is just flowing out of my heart? Heaven is inside of me. You become desireless, which people confuse for not wanting to do anything. Like, you'll sit on the couch, stare at the wall. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Not at all, right? It's very much the opposite. You have much more vigor for life, much more appreciation and gratitude, and even curiosity to experience life. You'll want to go see the world and experience new things, but not from a standpoint of lack, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going on this trip to fulfill my aching heart that's so painfully empty. That's how the person goes on a vacation, right? The person's looking for fulfillment out of it.
Yeah.
But the enlightened mind wants a vacation just to experience more of the universe because it's out there and I got to go see it. Yeah.
Like a child.
So it's like a child, exactly. That open-eyed curiosity and wonder. Yeah. Everything is alive with mystery. That's oneness. And even if you had to be stuck in a room for the rest of your life, you'd still be just as wide-eyed and in that mystery because it's inside of you. It's not outside of you. Yeah. So to get back to your question of like, what's the best thing somebody can do to begin realizing this state? As we've been saying, you really can only get rid of the false because what's true is already here. So you shouldn't waste your time trying to find what's true, but just remove what's obscuring what's true, which is all your false definitions, your false beliefs of who you are. Get rid of that stuff, right? And the way we do that is through self-inquiry, as Ramana Maharshi would teach it, which is always to question the source of everything that arises. If there's a personal desire that arises, just question whose desire is this? Is it the universe's desire or is it the person's desire? Mm-hmm. And you'll know the difference because it'll come from lack or from abundance, one of the two. And it's pretty easy to know the difference, right? So when you notice it's coming from lack, it's from the person, you just stay in that conviction of that's not me. You negate it. That's not myself. That's the person. That's ego. And over time, this is called neti in the Hindu tradition, which means not this, not this. You just keep refusing to give as often as you can because you won't catch it all the time. But slowly you'll begin to catch more and more of those subtle movements of the mind, claiming and identifying with everything. And you just say, no, that's not me. That's not me. And what I like to teach on my YouTube channel about ego, because there's a lot of sort of confusing ideas about ego out there, to make it really, really simple. What is the ego? The ego is very simply the mental activity of identifying, or the mental activity of claiming. So that's why we'll say that there is no ego, because ego is just a activity of the brain. There's no entity up there. There's no person up there. It's literally a function of the human mind. And it's that function which says, I did that. I thought that. I felt that. Me, my, I, mine. That's ego. So really, if you get really good at watching that activity of claiming and just letting it go, soon you'll find an amazing sense of emptiness and vastness arises in you, and you experience it as stillness, as an inner silence, a quieter mind. And really, that's the state where you are in communication with reality. Silence is the state where we are in communication with everything that's real, because we're not labeling and defining it, right? And then you can experience reality as it actually is. Past the veil of all your labels and thoughts about it, you experience it as it is. And what you find is it's always good. It's always love. It's always beauty. And it's never anything else. And anything else it seems to be is a projection of the egoic mind. And you just learn to tell the difference over time. And as you fall in love with reality, that's where the real magic happens. Because when you're in love with somebody, does anyone have to remind you to think about your lover? Like, no, right? It's all you can think about. When you fall in love with reality, it's all your heart longs for. It's all you want. And so whatever stands in the way of your communication with that reality, judgments, self-doubt, insecurities, etc., you just learn to move your heart away from them. No part of me wants that. I don't care about that story. I'm not interested in that idea. I want reality. I want love. I want oneness. And that's what brings that state about and makes it a permanent state once you fall in love with it.
Wow, that's awesome. Really. Yeah. I have another question with that, because that what happened to me. I think I returned from the total enlightened state because somehow I think the ego or the mind is like, what about your family? You're gonna be different. What about your identity? What about me? What about you're gonna be like a monk on a mountain or something? Because mind is afraid of the new, and that's new for the mind. And I also, many people in my channel, they say, oh, I am not this person. So who am I? And they get scared. They think something is gonna, the enlightenment is going to take away their family or their jobs. They're gonna die or something. So would you comment about that?
Yeah. Great question. Truthfully, you should be very happy you're not the person, right? Because the person's going to die. The person's not making it out of here alive, right? And so if you are that centelia, that divine spark, then you are making it out of here alive. It's the body that dies, and the divine essence within the body lives on, and you are that. So might as well get to know yourself as that now while you have an opportunity to, rather than waiting for the moment of death to try and change your identity at the last second. It's not going to work, right? And so really it's the body identification that's the biggest hang up, believing you're the body. The ego's first object of identification, when the ego comes online at about 1 or 2 years old, it starts to come online and label things and remember things. The first thing it identifies with when it asks that question, who am I, is the body, because it's looking through the body. So if you are the body, then you are impermanent and you're going to die one day. So you're doomed and destined to suffer every day of your life, because every day of your life, you're on a ticking countdown, right? One less day to live. So ego has full reign over you when you believe you're the body. Whatever the body suffers is what you suffer. As the body ages, you feel like I'm aging. And so your sense of worth, your sense of value is diminishing over time. The body is fragile, it's delicate, it has to be constantly defended and protected. And so your sense of self becomes equally weak and vulnerable when you think you're the body. And so this question arises for people who pursue enlightenment. The ego will try to scare you away from it by painting it out to be something horrible, some terrible fate that no one would want to suffer, right? You want to go to a mountain and be a monk the rest of your life? Better to just die now than that. Anything's better than that. And truthfully, there's just that divine intelligence, right? We call it God, source. And if you are that, then surely that divine intelligence is intelligent enough to still play the role of a person after enlightenment, right? Like, is God so dumb that God doesn't know how to be a person too? Like, God's dreaming all of it, right? It's all God's mind. So what you find is, and I mean, I can only speak from my own experience, but as you merge more into this state of oneness and unity and emptiness, you become nobody. You find that your person, your character, becomes much more intelligent, much more likable, much more relatable. Everybody loves a nobody. You know, when you're nobody inwardly, everybody loves you because you're not looking to prove yourself, to be liked by people. You're just there to love. Love is all you want. And so you're happy to take the back seat for others, to let others have the limelight. And who doesn't want to be around somebody like that, right? So Jesus, I think, exemplified this state so perfectly. If you want to know what the enlightened mind looks like in action, look to Christ. Was Christ a loser who went to a mountain the rest of his life and drooled and stared at a wall? Like, no, he was the most dynamic. He was the most inspiring. He was the most influential and impactful. And that's the way you become when you become enlightened, because truthfully, you are some amazing, unique expression of that divine intelligence. And you have a unique way of expressing that intelligence. You are a unique way of expressing it. But to the degree you are identified with ego as the person, all egos are the same. They're all identical. They all want the exact same thing. It's survival of the fittest. Look out for number one, self-preservation, fight to get to the top. Everyone else is an obstacle for me to overcome. So when we live from ego, we become the same as everyone. We become these sort of automatons where even our very personality and behavior is predictable. Like, we all know people who are very trapped in ego. They're extraordinarily predictable, aren't they? You know everything that they're going to think about everything. You know how to trigger them. You could press their buttons like you're playing a keyboard, right? Because they're just a walking program almost. There's nobody really there.
Yeah.
So when you get free of that stuff, that divine, constantly new, fresh, alive mystery of that intelligence expresses through you. And in every moment, you're unpredictable to everyone, even to yourself, because you're living in that childlike state of the don't know mind, where you literally have no clue what's going to come out of your mouth. You have no clue what you're going to do in the next moment, because life is living you. Like, you don't have the experience of being an individual, separate self who's doing the living. It's the opposite. You feel as if you're being lived by all of life, by the universe itself. And in that light, you're getting out of the way. You're sort of opening the channel for that divine intelligence to just flow through you. And it flows through you like love, wisdom, peace, beauty. Wise love in action is the way that the sage kind of operates. And it's so easy to recognize, because there's a certain, even just the energy of a being in that state is so palpable, right? We all love being around somebody who's quiet and still and empty inside, because to be empty of self is to be full of the divine.
Yeah. When ego is zero, God is all.
Hey.
I heard that from Lester Levinson.
I love that quote.
Yeah, that's
It's
awesome.
so true.
Yeah. So I also like to ask you about the higher self, which I told you we call here Centelha Divina, Divine Spark. And I always I try to teach people how it worked for me, because once I realized I had a divine spark, this higher self, not like a angel, but myself, a version of me, and is really me, myself, and I could ask for help, guidance, and quiet my mind and have guidance of this divine intelligence. I had so many nice things happening in my life, and that's what I try to share with people. So you told us here about ego. Now, could you explain us better about this higher self or divine spark, which is our real identity?
Yeah. Have you listened to much of of Ra's explanation of the higher self and the law of one?
Yeah, I try to explain my subscribers about the 7 densities, and your videos helped a lot. And also I listened to the recordings, really nice, which is really good for me because she speaks really slow, so I can understand 100%.
Slow.
Even though it's deep, very deep subject, but really, really nice.
Yeah, so I'll just summarize the densities idea so I can explain how the higher self fits into that.
Wow.
Ra explains that the evolution of consciousness, or we call it reincarnation in spirituality, the soul reincarnates thousands and thousands and thousands of times through these 7 densities of consciousness, kind of like a spectrum. And we see the first 3 in perfect detail here in our world, because this technically is a 3rd density world that we're living in now. These are 3rd density bodies. And so the idea is a density refers to the density of light that is contained at a different stage of consciousness. So let's say we have like a frame about this size, and there's a photon vibrating. So if it vibrates this speed, the density of the light in that frame is not super great because it's not vibrating very fast. There's not a lot of light covering that spectrum yet. But when it speeds up and it gets so fast that it's vibrating at this speed, the density of light is much, much higher or denser in that space. So as there's more density of light, the more information is available. The more information is available, the more ability for consciousness to express itself. Consciousness is limitless and infinite. So it needs some kind of finite medium to express itself through, or maybe even like press itself through, so it can have an experience of finiteness and it can actually know itself. And so through this long journey of the spectrum of densities of light, consciousness moves through that through reincarnation. And it begins at the first density, which is the density of the four elements of the zodiac, we could say. So earth, water, fire, air. These are like the basic four energies that make up what a human even is, what the world is, what earth even is. So consciousness, as we know through science, spent about 2 billion years or so in that first density state of just rock, water, fire, magma, and wind interacting, the four elements, until eventually microbial life was formed. Microbial life was the very first stage of second density. That's where consciousness learns the ability for growth and movement and interaction with the environment. So single-celled organisms can move around and they can interact with each other. And so second density goes from microbial life all the way up through insects, plants, and animals. And so like the latest stage of second density would be like a pet. And then we get to the third density of consciousness, which is where consciousness evolves the ability for self-awareness, gaining a conceptual understanding of I exist. And that's the density where consciousness learns separation. I'm over here because I'm this body, and you're over there because you're that body. So we're not one, we're separate. So you're an obstacle, you're a potential threat, you're an enemy. And consciousness, at least on our planet, has spent about 100,000 years in that density. And we've seen all the effects of that density, which some are really good and some are kind of not so good. War, strife, calamities, genocide, all the evils that mankind inflicts on itself, that's a product of third density thinking or third density consciousness. And the savior for third density consciousness is fourth density consciousness. So when that particle of light is vibrating fast enough to take in enough information about reality, it starts to learn that reality is actually not separate. He goes, oh, wait a minute, we're all in separate bodies, yes, but we're all the same essence. There's just one energy, and we're all that one energy. Okay, this is what we call love. So consciousness learns how to operate in reality through a oneness state of consciousness, where everyone is equally as valid as myself. We all share unity with each other. And that's the fourth density of consciousness, which humanity is currently at this precipice of evolving into fourth density. And we're seeing some turbulence in that, which is natural, which is part of the process. We have to purge away the third density ways of thinking, that we're separate from one another, that we're enemies from one another, that we're threats to one another. We have to do away with that. And so we're in the process of doing away with that right now, which is an uncomfortable process, but it's, again, a necessary process. So we get into fourth density, that's the density of love. And I guess I should have mentioned another important point is that each density correlates to the chakras. So first chakra is the root, or first density is the root chakra. Second density is the sacral chakra. Third density is the solar plexus chakra. Fourth density is the heart chakra, love, universal oneness. Fifth density is the throat chakra, which is sort of the wisdom density or the density of light. It represents authenticity, radiation of self, regardless of the actions of the other, being true to who you are and communicating truthfully. And then sixth density is the third eye or the pineal gland chakra. And that's the density of unity, where love and wisdom of the fourth and fifth chakras have to be perfectly balanced in equal proportion. And that apparently is a very finely tuned process that takes many, many, many millions of years. And so the higher self comes in at about the mid sixth density stage. And so what Ra says is that in fourth density, the soul evolves and polarizes through service to others, traveling the universe, finding other planetary civilizations that you can help out, help them solve their world problems, teach them the ways of love and light. That's how fourth density consciousness ascends. Eventually, it polarizes enough to where it can reach a fifth density state, and it has to change the way it polarizes. So the fifth density being spends a lot more time inward because it's the wisdom density. So it's about self-knowledge, knowing who you are psychically, telepathically, learning the ways of the powers of consciousness, time travel, telepathy. All these things evolve to greater magnitudes in the fifth density. So it's more of a density of isolation and inward focus. Sixth density is the balance of those two, service to others and inward focus. You have to achieve perfect unity. So at a certain stage, apparently, the sixth density being cannot polarize any further. They've literally done everything they can in the universe up to that point to gain spiritual charge. So Ra says at that point, the sixth density soul, in order to keep evolving and polarizing, it has to do something different now. And so what it does is it sort of turns backwards in time and serves as a guide to all of its previous incarnations. And that's what we call the higher self. So literally the higher self is you from the future. It's your future self, which really exists simultaneously. Everything is simultaneous in reality. And so you might think, well, that's a bit of a conundrum, because if I've already lived all these lifetimes, how could I be a guide to them? I already know what I'm going to do, right? And that's true from only one perspective. You know what lifetimes you lived from the perspective of the character in the play, so to speak, but you don't know what happened behind the curtain. Mm-hmm. So you don't know why you chose to deliver yourself all those lessons, why you made that experience happen at that time, at that place. So the higher self has to sort of figure out what the best way is of bringing its former self all the catalysts and the lessons it needs without overreaching its boundaries and infringing on its free will. So the higher self isn't here to give us answers. It's not here to help us cheat on the test or something. It's here to serve us these lessons, and we can communicate with it, asking it to show us things and reveal truth to us. But it does that through life, through reality. So that's why when we ask higher self to help us learn a lesson, like let's say, please, higher self, I have such a grudge against this person. Show me how I can forgive them. I just can't find it within my heart how to forgive them. Well, maybe a few days, weeks, months go by, and all of a sudden you do something really horrible to someone. And you just feel so guilty and shameful. And you're like, oh, how could I have done that? That was so selfish of me. I hurt them so badly. And then all of a sudden a little intuition sparks and you go, that's what they did to me. Now I'm experiencing what they did to me from the other side of the equation. You're like, oh, yeah, let me forgive them.
A taste of your own medicine.
A taste of your own medicine, right? That's kind of how the higher self works.
Yeah, a lot of wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah, because you got to learn the lesson yourself. It can't learn it for you, right?
Yeah. It doesn't give you like the answer in a way that is not going to teach you, but gives you the answer in a way that is making you find the answer.
Yeah, you have to become the answer.
Become the answer. Yeah, great. Oh. Well, Aaron, thank you so much. A lot of things here, so many subjects, really deep. It's really very good to listening to you. So I don't even wanted to make questions so I could listen more.
Well, I've loved your questions, and I think we've had a lot to unpack, but I've had a blast, and I really appreciate you having me on. It's been fun.
Yeah. I hope we can do that again.
I would love to.
Maybe live on Instagram, so you can answer questions from our centellas.
Yeah, I always love doing that.
Yeah, they love this kind of videos when we are live and they are making questions and we are answering. Really, really nice.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you so much, Aaron, for your time. And I hope we see you again in another opportunity.
Most definitely. Thank you so much, May. Namaste.
Thank you.